Welcome to Lunch with the Lord. I'm Pastor Mark, and I want to speak this message on the subject of what is in thine hand. What is in thine hand? And when we are learning any kind of a new trade, it is important for us to first learn the tools of that trade, whether it's carpentry, or whether it's electrician, or whether you're teaching, or any kind of a sport like hockey or basketball, baseball. There are tools, there are things that accompany this trade or this sport or this thing that you're doing that need to be learned in order for us to be considered proficient in this trade or in this thing that we're doing. So Moses grew up in Pharaoh's home, and he never really had to do any physical labor. But he was in a position of doing administrative work. So Moses grows up in Pharaoh's house as Pharaoh's son, and because of that, he really kind of never had to do physical work that we know of anyways. Is it possible that Pharaoh had Moses do some kinds of manual labor? I guess it's possible, but generally speaking, in those days, or even today, when you were king or a ruler, your children did not get involved with physical labor that much. After Moses ran away from Egypt, he did learn to tend sheep. And as a shepherd, there was a tool that was involved in being a shepherd, and that tool was called a staff. Now, a staff was used by the shepherd for the purpose of protection, guidance, support, and also correction. It was used for protection against enemies of the sheep. It was used for guiding the sheep. It was used also for support. Support meaning that Moses, the shepherd, would use to help hold him up physically, and also for correction, to correct the sheep with. Every shepherd had a staff, and they had to learn how to use that staff. Now, what is a staff? A staff is a piece of dead wood that's chosen by the shepherd. Each shepherd has their own priorities, their own likes concerning the staff that they use. They have their own likes, their own dislikes, and they choose the kind of staff that they want when they are tending their sheep. Now, when I was a young boy growing up, we lived, well, not really out in the country, but out in the suburbs of our town that we lived in. And across the street from our house, there was a farmland, and there was a barn just maybe 100 yards down the street. But also, as we walked out of our house, to the left of our house, the road was in front of our house, and to the left, the road would go down and around a corner, sharp corner, and then about a mile down the road, there was a quarry, and it was called Callinan's Quarry. And in the summertime, when I was a young boy growing up, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, every summer there would be these dump trucks coming up from the quarry, past the house and going who knows where. And they had rocks and stones in the trucks, and they were transporting these, carrying these stones somewhere. Well, because of that sharp corner, and because our house was just past the sharp corner, we had an ample supply of these little stones that fell off these trucks as they passed by. And of course, we had playing sports. If any of you remember, if you're old enough to remember, now they probably still have them today, but in the stores, you could buy those yellow plastic bats with the wiffle ball. Remember? They had the plastic bat, and at the end of the plastic bat, they had a white wiffle ball attached to it with and you could buy that for whatever, $1 or $2, something like that, back in the 1960s. Well, we used to buy those bats and play wiffle ball with friends. But I used to always love to take that wiffle ball bat, that yellow plastic bat, and I would go out in front of the house, and I would pick up these stones, and I would hit the stones with the bat, and they would go across and I used to love, I would be out there for an hour or two, and I would hit these stones, and sometimes I would see how far I could hit them, or also across on the other side of the street, there were power lines. So I used to like to hit the stones and try to get the stones in between the power lines and see how far I could hit up and how far I could. Sometimes I'd try to hit the hit the pole, the power pole, the wooden one, see if I could hit that with the stone. But I got pretty good being able to choose what kind of stone depending upon what I wanted to do. If I wanted the stone to go far, I would pick a certain kind of stone. If I wanted to make the stone hum, like if you hit it hard, if it spun, you would pick a stone that had a lot of edges on it. And it would spin, and you could hear it humming when you hit it. And so you got proficient in, I got proficient in picking the kind of stone that I wanted to hit with what I wanted it to do. And this is the way it was with shepherds and their staffs that they chose. Each shepherd had a staff, the kind of staff that they wanted. They chose a staff as it suited them. And this piece of wood that was used as a staff was lying in a patch of wood somewhere, left there to rot and deteriorate. And this piece of wood was picked up by a shepherd chosen specifically for a purpose. And so here you have a piece of wood that fell off a tree, a limb, and it's laying there, and it's left there to basically rot and deteriorate into the ground. And a shepherd comes along, and he sees different pieces of wood there, and he chooses a piece of wood, and he says, this can be a staff for me. And they take that piece of wood and they cut it and do with it what they need to in order to make that dead piece of wood into a staff for them. Now, in Exodus chapter 4 and verses 1 and 2, we're going to be reading. And Moses answered and said, but behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice. For they will say, the Lord has not spoken unto thee. Verse 2, and the Lord said unto Moses, what is in your hand? Moses, what's in your hand? And he said, Moses said unto God, a rod. A rod is in my hand. His staff was in his hand. The piece of dead wood that Moses found somewhere that was left to rot in the woods. That was what was in his hand. The dead stick that Moses looked at, and he said to himself as Moses went into these woods. Now, we don't know. My guess is there probably was not a store in Israel that sold staffs. You know what I mean? Like today you have grocery stores, fruit stands, and everything. My guess is there probably was not a staff store in Israel anywhere where shepherds could go and buy staffs. In those days, you went to a woods, you looked at the dead pieces of wood that were laying around, and you chose a piece of wood that would work for you for being a staff. And Moses went into the woods one day, and he looked at these dead pieces, and he saw one, and he said, you know what? That piece of wood, that will do for a staff. And God asks Moses, what is in your hand? You know, to have something in your hand means that it is under your control. It is under your authority. It's under your power. When you have something in your hand, it's under your authority and power and control. You know, there are many things in our power that are under our control. In our hand, we have the power to love. We have the power to forgive. We have the power to invest. Also in our hand, we have the power to build people up. And we have the power to honor and serve God. These are things that we have in our hand. But also in our hand, we have our husband or our wife to build them up into a bigger capacity for God, to serve God with them. Also in our hand, we have our children. Children are like arrows that are prepared and then let go into this world. God has put your children in your hand for about 18 years to help prepare them for this world. Some longer, some shorter. But God has put in your hands your children. What's in your hand? Also, another thing in your hand is your work or your schooling. You have the power to go to work happy and strong in the Holy Spirit, or you can go to work depressed and bored and unsatisfied. What's in your hand today? There are a lot of things that are in your hand. And God's asking you, what's in your hand? You know, we have to take the old dead, if we take the old dead stick that is in our hand and we give it to God, God can do great things with it. Just like God said, Moses, what's in your hand? And Moses said, a rod. God said, throw it on the ground. And that rod became a serpent. God can do great things when we give what's in our hand unto him. I want to finish this lesson with, you know, when we give our husband or our wife or our children or our work or our love or our forgiveness, whatever, if we give it to God, God can do great things with it. Without God, All these things are dead anyways. But given to him, he can change them into something that glorifies him. What's in your hand? It's dead stick. That's right. It's a dead stick. In your hand, it's a dead stick. When it's under your power and under your control, it's just a dead husband, a dead wife, a dead child. All it is, it's something, it's dead work. It's dead schooling. It's dead whatever. In your hand, it's dead. But when God says, what's in your hand? You say, it's a rod, it's whatever. And God says, throw it on the ground. Give it to me. Give it to me. And when we give it to God, God is able to do great things with it. And we take these things, the things that are under our control and under our power, and we say, God, I don't want this in my control, under my power, and under my human intellect anymore. I want to give it to you and let you do great things with it. If God can take a dead stick that was a stick that was dead and in the woods and ready to deteriorate into the ground, if God can take a dead stick and do great things with it, God can take those things that are in your hand and do great things with them. God bless you.